Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Founders Cut. Today, I'm super excited to introduce you to Abesh. He is starting a new and exciting way to keep your plants alive. I think for people that have been listening to these episodes, I like to start off by not focusing on the startup immediately, but on the founder. So, we'll love to take the first, few minutes here, getting to know how you got to this point in your journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So it started by horticultural hopelessness. I was not a plant person before Flora. I was killing every single plant in my line of sight. And, that was really the major recipe for how Flora started. It was around 2.5 years ago at the start of the pandemic. I was looking to get into plants just like everyone else and their mothers. It was a total game changer in terms of, stress relief, mental health benefits, decor. Everyone knew about plants and their benefits, but not everyone could actually keep those plants alive. And so I found out that I was very much one of them, despite the fact that, my parents have green thumbs. My mom has dozens and dozens of plants that, have been blooming for years around our entire journey from multiple cities as first generation immigrants. We were always surrounded by plants. Even my family, when you look at like my great grandparents and my grandparents, there were farmers on their end. So this was something that I personally had a vendetta against, the fact that I couldn't get into it. And the biggest turning point was when I was geeking out about DIY electronics. So, creating my own Arduino kits, creating my own little robotics. And so the timing was perfect in that, I wanted to join that love for just getting into DIY electronics with how to save my plants. And so I ended up MacGyvering sort of my first little moisture sensor kit, and it would tell me exactly how my plant was doing. And that was the start of what came to be Flora, right? The big idea was that there really wasn't something like a Fitbit for your plants. I was surprised that, electronics and IoT and all this stuff hadn't really made it to the consumer market like Nest had done for thermostats, or Alexa devices had done for the home, or even Ring cameras, started kind of blowing up in popularity. I was thinking, why isn't there something like this for plants and gardening? And, you have all these enthusiasts that know about it in hydroponics or aquaponics and stuff like that. But for me, it was like, hey, I'm curious. Let's get into it. Let's solve this pain point for myself. And the other big turning point was realizing there weren't a lot of apps that were doing, plant care and plant care education. There wasn't a single app that I found for me that took and married the concept of community with like a utility app that would take the guesswork out of plant care. So I taught myself Swift development. I really got my hands dirty. I wanted to teach myself, mobile development. And so I created the Flora app, which came before the actual device itself, the Flora Pod. And, we were off to the races. We created a Planker app that's now grown to 150,000 users in a little over a year and a half. And we just launched our first batch of 1,000 Flora Pods. And it's really, at the end of the day, all about these bad boys right here. So you can see this Flora Pod is actually monitoring my alocasia plant that's been growing. It's actually outside of the frame here, which is insane. This was not this successful beforehand. And now this Flora Pod essentially tells me how much light it's getting, when to water it, if the temperature and humidity, especially for these alocasias, are out of range. And it's just fun. It's fun getting these alerts while I'm traveling and out of town. And, we're already getting great feedback from our customers and, these Flora Pods saving their plants. And that was the original mission. And we've come a long way since then.
I've got, hundreds of questions about the tech itself. But before we do that, I want to continue focusing on you. What were you doing as a day job before you decided to learn how to code and build a product around, making everyone's home life a little bit more healthy and happy?
Yeah, so I was lucky in that I was working at Microsoft, pretty cushy gig. I was a technical account manager, so I wasn't particularly like, in engineering. I wasn't like, coding lines and lines of code every single day. It was more so technical know-how of all the different office suites and office products that we were kind of working in the financial tech sector. So not super relevant to what I was doing, right? But it did provide sort of the financial kind of foundation and the motivation to kind of spring and go full time into Flora. So I was in Microsoft for a year where I'd built up some savings, I'd built up some prototyping, I'd built up some investments coming in to where I was like, okay, time to take the jump. I got a year of runway. Let's do this. And that's I believe at the end of 2020, around September 2020 is when I took the full jump, I believe. And then before that, I was actually a Reverb. It was a marketplace startup for musicians. So it was basically like the eBay or Amazon for musical instruments. You can buy and sell anything musically related on the site. And I joined shortly after Series A there, was there for a little bit over, close to 4 years. And we got acquired by Etsy. And that whole journey, that startup journey, was really what got me hooked. And fun fact and fun story, the CEO and founder of Reverb became our first investor. So I, worked my way up enough to where, I was a sales engineer there, became a sales engineering manager. So I was always straddling the line between biz dev and, technical engineering. And I always had this chip on my shoulder about not knowing how to kind of go all in and code myself and develop myself. I knew enough to be dangerous, but there was always this barrier of like, hey, like maybe I'm not smart enough to figure this out. And so Flora was really a project of kind of letting go of all those biases and, preconjections, and then just jumping into it and learning to do it and doing it. And so still not, I would say the best coder, but it's definitely been a wild ride and learning Swift development and learning, certain like coding architectures and patterns. So it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that you use the word best, right? There's a misconception in the startup world about having to be the best to get something across the finish line. In reality, it's got to be good enough to get your point across, and
Mm-hmm.
then once you get your point across, there's enough momentum there and enough proof points to help you find the people to help you become the best at X, Y, or Z. And in this case, making engineering a green thumb for everyone at home, right?
Yeah.
So I like your story because I think my goal for this podcast is for not just for investors and hopeful employees of startups to hear about it, but I also want it to be a motivating factor for people that might be at a cushy corporate job that have ideas that want to take the leap. And I think your story is one that can resonate with a lot of people that probably have really good ideas. What keeps me up at night, hypothetically, just from like a perspective, like what do I want to see? I want to see more people that have good ideas that can change the world, get out there and make that leap. So very cool for you to share that aspect of your story.
Thank you.
Going back to the product, because I think people are going to be curious to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk me through what version one was of what Flora was, and now where you're at today.
Yeah, gosh, I always keep like the jumble of wires and like soldering kits next to me, but I had to clean it up. But the V1 was this ugly mess of like, circuit boards and wires running like, across one another. And the idea was essentially the self-contained moisture sensor that you could plug into the soil, and it would essentially just light up this green LED if it was moist, and if it wasn't, then it'd be a red light.
Mhm.
And so that was the first moment where it was like, what if it was self-contained? What if it was an IoT device? What if it was totally wireless? And that was like the beginning kind of ideation of the product on the technical end. Was we wanted to make an easy to use, affordable moisture sensor. We wanted it to be accurate. We wanted it to be completely wireless, so you could access your plant and talk to your plant, whether you're in Omaha, Nebraska, or in California, and your plant's based in Nashville. Like, you would still get insights even if you're traveling on vacation all over the world. The other thing that's super important for plants is light, right? The biggest two reasons that people kill their plants are overwatering, underwatering, or just a complete lack of light and light conditions overall. So we took that to the drawing board and we realized, hey, we don't like what's out there in terms of Amazon and existing moisture meters. They all use the same, capacitance based moisture sensor. And we knew what we had to do in sort of like a basic tech, spec component to build out something that met our competitors, but kind of beat them just a little bit over. You kind of mentioned it already, like perfect was not our end game at the beginning. The end game for the beginning was just getting to prototype, getting to like our first functional thing that actually worked. And that was just a bunch of, like getting dirty with your own hands, like creating your own kind of moisture, like sensor prototypes, like figuring out what people would actually use, what they wouldn't care about. And the first prototype, it took us months to get to. And it's hilarious because that first prototype was literally the size of that plant, like that pot you just saw. And what's insane about that, like hardware is hard for a reason, right? There's all these risks with capital and capital deployment, and anything can go wrong with supply chain. And God knows we started at like the worst time of all times to do a hardware product, where you have the pandemic, chip shortages, supply chain issues, this whole secret war with China that's going on, trade wars. Like it, every single one of those hit us like directly at some point. And I'll never forget, even with all that being done, we were on our way. First prototype was getting, to us, and we needed it to secure like an investment. And all of a sudden I got a call from our hardware lead saying that, hey, the Mexican government has their hands on the first FloraPod prototype. And I'm like, wait, what? Like customs or what? And they were like, no, 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 no. The feds have your product because it got basically bundled up with narcotics packages from like the drug cartel. And I was like, all right, like that was not on the bingo board for like hardware issues and supply chain issues. Like all these things that we didn't see coming kind of hit us with that first prototype. And so the idea was, let's just do this as fast as possible, get to market, get this, in front of investors, and like chasing perfection. You're right. Like we would have been late to the game, and we wouldn't have survived if that was the case. And even now looking at our product, like I kind of showed it to you before, the idea was, let's make a product that's cute, like easily blends in. I thought of the initial design for the product, that I thought of was actually based on a adding personality to the robot and to the sensor. And so you probably can't see it here, but all FloraPods have two eyes, very much like Eve or Wally, from the movie Wally.
Mm-hmm.
Was the idea that I wanted it to be personable. I wanted people to be able to connect with the product, and that was kind of the bare bones functionality and what we had in mind. And now we've come to this point. We've delivered about 1,000 of them. People are using them. We're working to get it into retail distribution at Home Depot. And we already have another set of requirements and getting it smaller, working on a more advanced sensor. But yeah, it was all about starting lean and starting slow and starting small at first.
I love it. And correct me if I'm wrong, you said the app came first and then the hardware second, right?
Yep.
So you had users on the app,
Yep.
giving you feedback, helping you test the software itself.
Yep.
And then from there, built out your pipeline of potential first users too, I'm guessing,
Yep.
from that. So, talking about those first users, can you talk a little bit more about your current traction, your proof, your KPIs, whatever you want to highlight to kind of validate the story a bit more?
Yeah. So when we first launched, getting users was all about boots on the ground, like just getting it out there, right? Our big bet was that we had created this wonderful utility app that would send you reminders, care guides, tell you everything you needed to know to actually take care of your plants before the device was out. We were sort of building the iTunes and like the Apple ecosystem and infrastructure before the iPod actually came out, right? And so that was the big bet. And our first couple thousand users actually came from Facebook groups. We jumped into all these plant groups and Facebook groups all across the United States and different states. We got into a bit of a heat and trouble because some of those groups like would block us because they knew we weren't from that state or that region. And like we were very boots on the ground, like getting those users. And our first couple thousand came from that. And then based on the feedback and the data we'd gotten from those first few thousand, that helped us make really educated guesses about where those people came from, what demographics they were, who our core customers were. Even the first month or two, we knew like right off the bat, like these are the people that are using the app the most. And mind you, the first 6 months, we didn't really have monetization. It was just a free app. We were kind of just getting users. Shortly after that, my background is in paid advertising and digital marketing. I realized that we had enough info and data to kind of play around with paid advertising, getting like more plant parents in the ecosystem. And soon after, it worked out really well. We were getting a lot of like qualified, consistently, like relevant like traffic from Apple search, from Google search, from Apple search optimization, keywords. So we just doubled down on that, and it worked out really well. I think in the first year, we had about 40% average month over month growth, to where we grew to, well, now we've grown in a year and a half to 150,000 total registered users. So our growth has been consistent. And now what we're really focusing in on is organic growth, working with all of our plant shops and nurseries to get them to give us customers right as they purchase plants. We're working on a bunch of SEO content, bunch of referral, like word of mouth kind of strategies that are coming out the gates. So the paid strategy is really, it worked to kind of launch us and then traject us to where we are today. But now it's using a healthy mix of both to make sure that we keep the cost per user the same and we keep growing without really overpaying and hurting ourselves down the line.
Yeah, what's exciting as someone that has to look at startups and there's a lot of noise is the companies that can find a product that fits into a market that has really resilient and energized communities of users.
Yeah.
Not because they need to, but because they want to. Obviously, if they need to, that's also helpful. But in the case of like, hobbyist green thumbers that are at home, they're just passionate about having a really cool self-contained ecosystem of oxygen creating plants
Yeah.
and visually aesthetic or visually appealing aesthetics and things of
Yep.
that nature. So it's kind of like you want to find groups that uh, are just ready and willing to have cool technology to help them do their hobby in a more compelling way. And so the fact that you have 150,000 users currently and it's growing steadily makes a lot of sense. I assume that most houses in the US have some form of plants in there, whether it's one plant or many, and they probably prefer those plants to stay alive if possible. So
Yep.
it doesn't take much for me to see like the benefits of just the software alone, and then obviously adding in the hardware component. You talk a lot about we. Is it a universal we, or do you have a team that you're working with currently on this endeavor?
So yeah, I am the technical solo founder. I'm the only full-time employee in the States. We have three full-time employees in Ukraine. So we have a whole team out there of designers and developers. And then we have about 10 part-time contractors. So people from all over the world, including the UK, Australia, Canada, a few different states. Everyone from the plant specialists that are filling out all of the care guides that we have to the operations specialists that are working, on all the technical issues around the floor pod. So it's very much a lean team. We haven't raised like our first serious big round yet to kind of grow out the rest of the team. We've been sort of scrappy and lean, and now, it's kind of worked out to our favor as we're entering this really tough macroeconomic climate where money's tighter than ever before. It's helped us to kind of stay lean that way to where when we do grow and expand our team, we'll be ready for it. We'll know how to effectively do it. We'll do it sustainably. But yeah, I am the technical solo founder. Yep.
Got it. Got it. Well, kudos to everything you've done so far with your, you know, um, ad hoc team that you kind of built out.
Yep.
It's super cool to always hear about stories like this because, you think about maybe even just 15, 20 years ago, a lot of the things that you can accomplish with a virtual team couldn't even be dreamed about not too long
Yeah.
ago. So
Very
it's
true.
always very exciting to hear about people solo founding something, but building the team that they need at the time that they need it to get things across the finish line.
Yep.
Um, Something I want to throw out there is, what types of folks are you trying to get introductions to at this point in the journey of building a startup? Is it investors? Is it customers? Is it partners? Like, what's the ideal type of folks you're trying to get networked with?
Yeah, so always looking for investors, especially in the right fit, right? We found that the people that we love working with on the investment side are people that either really, really understand the mission, like at the core of what we are, we're trying to save a bunch of plants, right? We're very close and near to, the issue that is the climate crisis. Like we're directly related to reforestation and how plants in general, they're literally carbon sinks.
Hmm.
And so far, Flora's added about more than 500,000 plants to our platform. Through all the data we've collected, we've seen that over 270,000 plants have been saved by us. So we're literally, extracting tens of thousands of kgs of carbon emissions from the air. So people that get that mission, people that get the model of what we're trying to build out are really great from us, especially with the consumer background, consumer tech. Folks are always welcome in terms of connections. So yeah, specifically looking for, early stage investors, angel investors are always welcome. And then on the partner side of things, we're actually, especially recently, looking into B2B folks that work with, interior landscaping or exterior
Yeah.
landscaping, people that handle, dozens, if not hundreds of plants at once for either offices or exterior landscapes or plant walls or whatever. We've made a lot of headway to where a lot of those clients are really interested in our product because we're essentially a plant health monitoring system for them, right? And so we're exploring that a lot more. So any connections that work in that space, work in that kind of floral area are super welcome.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see, your product integrated with other, more commercial operations, smart system where you monitor and then the irrigation's already in place too. And
Exactly.
then you can maybe free up the time for somebody to not have to do that manually and they can do something else
Yep.
instead. So a lot of cool potential down the road for sure.
Mhm.
As we kind of get towards the end of this, anything you want to kind of throw out there, talk about that you're proud of, excited about in 2023, shout people out. Kind of want to give people a platform to throw whatever they want out there.
Yeah, I would say the two big things are one, um, get kind of in a selfish way relevant to us. Check out the Floropod. We're really excited in that we did the hardest thing that we're scared of, which is getting a physical product to market. It's incredibly challenging. Lord knows we've been burned over and over again, but we've come to this point where our dreams are fulfilled. People are actually using our product that we designed and dreamt of, and they're using it to save their plants. And of course there's going to be multiple things to kind of fight through and troubleshoot and fix along the way, but I hope whoever has plants out there that they're fans of and trying to save, check out the Floropod. And more than happy to extend discount. Use grow 20 at checkout to get 20% off for all the listeners out there. And the second thing that I'll kind of just throw out there for everyone, founders, investors, and everyone alike, this year, at least for me, is all about kind of balancing self-care with self-compassion, and really focusing on mental health. I think the last couple of months have been really challenging and testing, with just all the ups and downs we've kind of gone through. And now we're entering the stage, especially for all startup founders out there, where money's tight, macroeconomic conditions are really uncertain. The startup environment is getting a different kind of lens and perspective on it. A lot of people are now entering kind of their last ditch effort kind of zones. And the biggest thing I'll say is, like, above all else, it's really your physical and mental health that matters, right? So it's challenging kind of balancing that, but there's obviously a bunch of tools and resources out there to help one another out. A great one is this app by a friend of mine called Stigma, which is literally crowdsourcing hope and help for one another through the outlet of mental health. So I definitely want to put that out there because it's going to get challenging, but just the awareness of that is the first thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, appreciate the reminder for everyone that's listening. And that's not just for startups, that's everyone that's just trying to, quote unquote, survive the real world, as cliche as that sounds.
100%.
So, yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. And then, as we wrap it up, what is the best place for them to find your product? What's the website? And if they want to follow you, is there a certain social media platform they should follow you on?
Yeah, so our website is Flora Sense. So it's our word flora and then sense as in 6 cents, all one word, florasense.com. And then you can just do florasense.com/buy to go directly to our checkout page to check out the Florapod and reviews and all that good stuff. And then for our Insta, our main kind of social media outlet, it's just at Flora Saves Plants. And then you'll be able to find us there.
I'm assuming it's just like a bunch of pictures of really beautiful home gardens and stuff.
Oh my God, yeah. Yep. It's fantastic. We're leaning a lot into Reels content as well. So you'll see a bunch of Reels with our social media coordinator, Sarita, just going over all these different beautiful plants and how to take care of them inside or outside. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. It's like, you hear about pet parents, it's plant parents basically, right?
All about the plant parents. That's right. The year of plant parents, 2023. That's a great way to wrap it up. Yeah.
Well, Abesh, I really appreciate your time. It's very inspiring to hear your journey from, employee at an early stage startup, going through the exit journey, joining the corporate world, and then, finding the courage and the foundation in place to jump into your own thing. I think there's going to be plenty of people that hear this story and can think to myself, I could see myself being in that similar position. So, thankful that you shared it with me and the rest of the listeners. And then, like Abesh said, if you want to find their company, florasense.com. And what was the handle again for Instagram?
Flora saves plants. Yep.
Flora saves plants. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you so much.